I guess some like high level. We're very much a magical seafaring game. A lot of it's, I think, like really core to the studio has been how do we create something that allows you to really like, spend time with your friends in this interesting world. And, I think even from like day one, Michael said a lot of the pivots. We've known we've wanted a seafaring game, but I think like a lot of that spending time together has really come out in that seafaring sort of fantasy. It's this, how do we explore the world? How do we, experience something that's interesting, evocative? You don't know what's around the corner, kind of stuff. So, and on top of that, I think seafaring has been this kind of through line for us with, how do you find and uncover like mysterious things in the world, and so, a lot of that was kind of like, I think originally we did a lot of visual direction. We've like gone through a lot of different art styles too. Like it started off very cartoony, big heads, kind of like top down even, has like changed in a lot of ways to now this, yeah. Mhm. Oh God. No, I mean it's. I think the interesting part is like you could. I'm sure Steph will be posting an image, but it's really just like I think the game has changed a lot. I think a lot of those, like I said, seafaring, magical stuff has really stayed true in a lot of ways in all the various forms. And hopefully that'll start coming through a little bit more cleanly soon. In future playtests, we're starting to really focus on a lot of that now. I think in general with that, when I say like magical seafaring, it's been a big goal of ours. I think originally, even from day one, to like avoid pirates, and like, not that pirates aren't great, but it's like how do we differentiate ourselves from that more Sea of Thieves or swashbuckling fantasy into something that might be a little bit more unique to what we want to do. And I think even on our end, a lot of us are big fans of very naturalistic, magical elements. You've got like Moana references. We all, I think, love that. Very inspired by how natural that is and how magical it is. And even Miyazaki films, how like mysterious and evocative those are. And I think of like, I think I skipped over in my intro the games I like, but I think a lot of those have kind of like, come across in a lot of, or been influenced in a lot of different ways. It's like Shadow of the Colossus and Zelda, and I think I even heard some people mentioning like Wildstar and like Jack and Daxter, and like crazy enough, those are huge influences, very exciting things that I love. So it's interesting that those are coming through in very subtle ways that people have picked up on, and that's incredible. So yeah. Mhm. Yes, of course. Mhm. Yeah. Let's see if I can just sort of screen share here. Let's see if this works. Is this hopefully everyone can sort of see this? Hopefully, yeah. This is I've condensed some of it over at least for the current direction. We have a lot of old stuff too that I won't show, but yeah. So I mean, there's a lot to cover. I think I told you this before, Michael. If I start to ramble, draw me back in. Um, yeah. Yes. Well, so it's interesting. With our current pivot, I can start here. We have this very quick piece of key art I did a while back with our pivot that kind of was like starting to capture, at least it was an idea for capturing sort of a new take on sort of when we pivoted to more of a survival crafting game. And I think a lot of where this started has been this very ancient, magical, primordial world. I can start with kind of the fabric of how everything comes to be in this world. It's very we've got mana, and it's sort of this energy of life. You can kind of think of it. A lot of the references have been very similar to the Force in Star Wars, but like it's this very elemental force that it sort of encapsulates fire, wind, earth, water. So a lot of that is attempting to be very core to how the world works. And I think as more of you play test and play the game, you'll start seeing more of the spirits come online. But a lot of that's kind of woven into, at least attempting to be woven into the fabric of the world. And that like to start super early with world building in general, it's when I say a primordial world, it's like with the cosmos, we'll kind of start there. It's this idea that there are these supreme beings, these what we're calling primordials, that were kind of like these fundamental embodiments of the elements, and they are the ones that kind of created everything. A lot of this probably won't come through in the game, but this is a lot of just like backstory that I think we've developed over time, just so we can all kind of get a beat on the sort of world we want to build. But these primordials ultimately are kind of the parents of spirits that you'll see more and more, and they create Nera, the setting of the game. They create Nera as a sort of place as like a sanctuary, a place for the spirits to hang out, to live, be protected. Specifically after this terrible force of the deep comes and essentially is trying to consume and destroy them. And so I guess to get to this image again, it's very much trying to establish this, like, as being kind of a quick sketch. It's very ancient, trying to get a lot of this like runic elemental kind of vibes across, these ancient beings that used to sort of walk the world and things like that. So yeah, at least in like the sort of creation of the world, it's this, again, fundamentally primordial elemental world, and that kind of leads to Nera coming to be. So let me get to, a lot of time has passed, yes. Gosh. So yeah, I mean, I can go into, let's see, I'm trying to think of like a good place to start with that. Yes. So yes. So I think Michael mentioned the big sort of like that stone arm that I think a lot of people saw. That is supposed to be sort of these characters. We're calling them the Ancients. These are essentially characters, beings that were created by the primordials. Essentially, they've had many names. We've called them golems, we've called them colossi, but we've landed on the Ancients, and they were essentially created to sort of safeguard, oversee, protect the spirits, and kind of foster the development of Nera. And so when I mentioned those malevolent beings, the deep, they basically, they come in, they're trying to consume spirits, and sort of these ancients are they're characters that they really were originally meant to protect. They were meant to sort of foster the growth of spirits, just protect them. They weren't really made for war. And so a lot of what you can see is this aftermath of the deep coming in. They invade Nera, the spirits kind of go into hiding, and the ancients get destroyed in the process. So a lot of, when you see that arm, it is quite literally, we're talking, we don't have an actual timeline, but this is many, many years, thousands, even longer, of these beings they were kind of the shepherds of Nera. They were trying to make a home for the spirits, trying to protect it, foster its growth, and they get killed in the process. And so you're kind of seeing the remnants of them and kind of strewn across Nera. So that's kind of some of the backstory behind them, and why you're going to see a lot of them across the world. So trying to think of going into more of the, let me see here. Yes, we are. Yeah. So we're called Echoes. We're known as Echoes. You'll notice that we look very human. There are bits of us there's some things that aren't fully captured here, but a lot of some other things we want to do with the character creator is to offer some like cosmetic tattoos, some like stone elements. A lot of what we want to try and do there is reinforce the relationship between our characters and the ancients. So when you think of Nera, the idea that this was a very like spiritual world, it was a very magical world. It was created for the spirits. But then you have these big colossal beings that were made to, again, protect it, look over the spirits, and then they essentially die. They get killed in the world by the baddies, and we'll go over them later. But that's kind of an unintentional thing. You can think of it like a lot of the comparisons have been like, the way something will die in the environment, and it kind of gets overtaken by nature. So a lot of these elements you'll see is they're getting overtaken by nature. They're inside landforms, mountains, things have grown around them at this point. And so you can think of them as they've kind of been, in a very natural way, retaken by the world, retaken by the environment. And these are very powerful beings. They were created by these supreme beings, these primordial elements. And so you can imagine their mana, their life force that I mentioned earlier, gets kind of sucked back into Nera and repurposed. And so all those motifs, a lot of the things we've been trying to develop is this repurposing of energy, the magic of the world. And so you can imagine their energy gets sucked back in. These are very physical beings. Spirits are very ethereal. And they kind of inadvertently pave the way for physical beings to exist in Nera. And so you can think of almost like a unintentional fluke in a way. Eventually, we are born. We are kind of this, there's this kind of creation element to it that when you start the game, which, we're still figuring out and polishing a bit, but that's a lot of where you kind of will spawn out of the waters, this kind of creation bit of the world where you're manifesting. And essentially, our characters being, when I said echoes, we're kind of echoes. We're remnants of their power. Their duty, their goal was to, protect and safeguard the spirits. And again, they died, and they're kind of, you can imagine their power get repurposed, and we're kind of taking over their charge. We're doing the same thing in a different way, which is ultimately our goal being to go out to Nera, explore the seas, explore biomes, collect spirits, bring them back home, build a haven for them, which is kind of this really big roundabout way. Like, ultimately, our main goal is to go out and find these things, and they're supposed to help us progress and build, give us awesome magical things to craft, and create a haven together and empower each other. It's a very symbiotic relationship. So that's at least a lot of the relationship of ancients, where our characters come from, sort of the elemental backgrounds and our purpose in the world. So yeah, I don't know if there were encapsulates it. Yeah. Yes, of course. We're going to go into the enemies here. We still have much to develop here. But we have, so when I mentioned the primordials, these are each kind of embodying a fundamental element. You've got fire, water, earth. We also have this idea of like light and void. These are, I guess, big things we're still working through, but a lot of what like void is, it's this I said that the deep comes in and they consume spirits. They're kind of this destructive force. So they're kind of from another realm. They come in, essentially they invade Nera. And a lot of when we mentioned the seafaring fantasy part of this, a lot of the main motifs there have been, how do we reinforce this deep sea, almost eldritch. I don't think we're going to go into horror necessarily, but that's a lot of motifs though that we want to kind of pull from. So you can imagine the deep as this realm of monsters. They're not always specifically deep sea creatures, but you can basically all the enemies in the game are going to be these things that have come in. They're attempting to find spirits, and we're kind of trying to prevent them from doing that. Finding spirits, bringing them home. We want to give them a safe haven. So these enemies are basically anti to our goals. And so you've got, I think anyone who's play tested has run into reef hobs. They're kind of more of the clumsy kind of fodder enemies. They're not particularly organized or intelligent. Kind of the equivalent of a goblin in maybe Lord of the Rings or any kind of other fantasy. So you're going to see a lot of them. We also have some enemies that we're developing now from another biome, which are these we're calling them Great Wood Hunters. They're these kind of they came over essentially seeking new game. I like to think of the deep as this kind of monster closet. Whatever we are kind of thinking will be compelling. So they'll kind of run the Great Wood, which is this big forest. It's going to be this kind of overgrown natural place, and these guys kind of hide around in these hunter nests, seeking spirits, causing problems for us. And so you'll run into them. And then probably the biggest threat is a lot of the deep sea creatures that you'll run in as we develop more of the seafaring gameplay. But these are, loosely called abyssals. They are a lot of big sea serpents. They've got bioluminescence and this all the way down to this giant sea serpent that will follow your boat, chomp at your boat. He's going to be kind of an ever-present threat. And then also these sea tentacles that will potentially come up out of the water and kind of scan the ocean at night and look for spirits, look for us. If they spot us, they'll spawn enemies. I've got some environment sketches here. I think probably a lot of you have again, anyone who's playtest has probably run into those little water mine urchlings. These are a lot of like the initial concepts for exploring those and how that will interact with the boat. But then we've got, you can kind of see from that other concept, again, these sort of monsters come up out of the water. You can imagine a lot of what we're wanting to push for is this kind of like, the nighttime's really dark. And in this world, it's very dangerous. So you can think of it coming to life at night. You're going to be taking on a lot of challenges at night, and traversing the ocean at night is going to be super treacherous, all the way down to, yes, this guy chomping at your boat. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, we're doing more and more exploration on what the ocean is for the game and what you do in it. And so again, a lot of you have seen the Embrace. We've gone through a couple iterations on it, but it's this idea that the golems are kind of like sheltering us, protecting us, and a lot of it's going to be shallows around these biomes and areas. It's a bit safer, a bit warmer, but kind of like what you mentioned, Michael. You get down into the deep. This is like the open seas. This is the down to where the terrible beasties come. The deeper you delve, the more treacherous it gets, to where eventually things will come up, snatch you. A lot of this is towing the line between like how terrifying do we want to go? Don't want to be a horror game, but like but reinforcing how this world has been invaded by these deep sea. This is what we're calling again the deep, that kind of roam the land and seas, and so especially the deep seas are going to be the most treacherous places that will try and get you. So, yeah, totally, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to like a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff we want to do, and it's always towing the line between what can we make sense of, what can we afford. I do think there's a lot of really fun overlap that we've like. Again, it's funny when I look at these characters have been around for a really long time, and I think we've been trying to find various ways to like justify certain things that that make sense. We don't want to just like throw stuff in there, but these guys are a really interesting example of what some of the reframe. You have all these different creatures that come over from this other realm, and I think there's a lot of fun, intriguing overlap with like they don't always all have to be bad. Um, they can be a different kind of creature. They could maybe be neutral. Maybe they're towing the line between. It's like, I'm going to make a buck off of this. It's maybe we can haggle, get some interesting, unique things from them. So I think there's a lot of room for merchants and things from other worlds, and ways we can find ways for the two worlds to kind of overlap. So that's at least like some initial things with them. Uh, at least the intent behind these little like merchant guys from another world, that kind of travel over to Nera. Um, but yeah, yeah. She was originally a very specific, unique NPC, and like we had like a whole affinity system and stuff. I think we're having to like reframe that a bit, but definitely want to find a way to repurpose her. Especially like I think there's a lot of interesting things that come to mind of like, a lot of her intent was got these weird mana sort of crystal growths on her back that maybe if any of you are familiar with Valheim, maybe she comes up and you can kind of like get some things off her back and then she goes back down to the ocean or something. But I think there's a lot of again these motifs with the ocean and the deep sea of where do we find really interesting ways to interact with this seafaring world, and this is an easy one. It's just we already have a lot of the assets. It's exciting. I think people respond really well to it. So there's a lot of again potential for figuring out where these fit in the game economy and all that stuff. Mhm. And the impact, right? What's going to resonate with people a lot, and like what should we prioritize? And it's like you want to get every realistic part of it. It's like what should we focus on first, and then add later potentially. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. These little guys. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it's like we're in this phase right now where we're trying to figure out exactly what they should do, and particularly how to make them really exciting and evocative. And so there's things all the way down to like I haven't explored this as much, but we're really embracing elements more and more. And so I'm sure a lot of you have noticed the little wisp that kind of floats nearby you. We're going to be pushing pretty hard into making that kind of indicative of how your character plays and is built. So you're kind of getting, we're kind of only focusing on like water, fire, earth, and wind right now. But that will kind of indicate what kind of build or element you're attuned to, and that'll have different play styles. Like, the fire one's more aggressive, and you'll have your little wisp will turn into this cool little, we're gonna figure out exactly what it looks like, but maybe it's a little, fire salamander or like a fire monkey or fox or something. But a lot of that's exploring what are some interesting ways we can visually reinforce how you like to play, and have maybe this little connection with reinforcing the spirit, and all the way to with how vital these are. We mentioned seafaring and spirits are super core to everything. We're exploring what we're calling these, it's internal language, but a lot of these are like these really powerful spirits. They're like this one being the spirit of the ocean. It's a kind of living embodiment of the water, and you'll quite literally be able to find this, awaken it, surf on its back. We've seen the skimmer, but a lot of what we're going to be trying to do is figure out how to directly incorporate these more powerful spirits into how you progress and how you interact with the world. So yeah, that'll be very exciting, hopefully. Yeah. Yes, of course. We've done, yeah, there's a lot of viz dev. A lot of it's been, I think, recently focused around the open seas. These are some initial images, but we've got, at least right now, the embrace, which is kind of that initial starting area. And then some of you have maybe mentioned that they're seeing the Greatwood, very much this aquatic forests is a lot of what we're trying to play around with. So, and even on top of these are much older actually, but they're still relevant. A lot of this is just exploration on, how do you apply some of these more understandable, maybe familiar types of biomes to a more seafaring environment. So in the future, we're talking like maybe we start you off with this very relatable tropical environment that kind of lets you get your bearings. You learn a little bit of the magic. Then you're kind of, little still pretty familiar. It's still very much a forest, exploring this kind of like island, like, aquatic forest, and then eventually moving to like, what does a desert look like in a seafaring, setting? I've talked with a lot of different people as we've developed things, but Final Fantasy is I've grown up with it. It's been a huge influence, and in particular, I remember Final Fantasy 12. They had this sand sea, and that has stuck with me forever. I've like desperately wanted to find a way to get like a sand sea into this like aquatic game, as like, how many survival crafting games have you experienced that, there's some kind of like a desert that has a heat mechanic and things like that? How do we apply that to this game? And it's like a sand sea would just be so cool. We still get our islands, we still get a lot of that stuff, but you're like, having to navigate your boat and surf through this like thick quicksand like sea or something. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. And who knows, maybe you go to a lava, right? Then you're like, yeah, sorry. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It might be, yeah. But who knows? Maybe you need some kind of protection. I don't know. That's totally in the cards. In order to delve. Hmm. 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 Yeah, we got. Oh yeah, this the spirit anchor guy. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. He's gone through a bunch of iterations. He's originally, well, we called him an island spirit. I think it's shifted now that we're focusing more on spirits. We're calling it a spirit anchor. This will kind of be probably one of the first things you build in the game. He's this kind of living remnant of the ancients. Part of his design is very much, he's like, you can imagine it being like quite literally a shard of these, ancient, let me scroll over here, basically like a piece of these guys left over. And basically kind of a repurposing of their power. And because of their connection with the spirits, and how powerful they are, this is kind of like one of the first sort of characters you'll interact with, and quite literally can take these little sleeping spirits now and help. You can kind of notice these little orbs in the water. The whole purpose of him is to, you place these little dormant spirits, these sleeping spirits in his waters, and he'll help reawaken them so you can, use them for crafting. They help you build things and stuff like that. It's kind of their intent. But yeah, he'll be a pretty core thing to both powering this whole power mechanic coming online where he'll like help magically keep your refiners running, and um, but will be very central to how you progress and build up around him essentially. So, and I think that's a lot of like, the hopefully the more accessible warm parts of this is like we're going to be trying to figure out how to we want it to have stakes. We want there to be like this sense of history and like ancient ruins and things like that, but also, when you're out on these voyages and you're getting attacked by these deep sea creatures, it's nice to be able to come back to someplace warm and has familiar faces. And I think a lot of what these are trying to do is to be that appeal, the sort of the cute things that you come home to that make you feel comfortable again. You like want to hang out there, and reinforcing that visually, that even with this, you see them kind of hanging out. They're watching others of themselves kind of, be awakened, and they're like, oh, this is cool. So a lot of what we want to do is try and find ways to reinforce how they are active and around your base, whether they're hanging out in the water or helping you with refiners or things like that, is kind of their intent. I do love some of this today. Hmm. Hmm. I think it's like a bit of like it's accessibility, hopefully, and just like personal interest. I think a lot of us just really like very stylized stuff. Me in particular, I just really like stylized art styles. That's kind of what's stuck in a lot of ways. It's led to a lot of more vibrant colors and exaggerated form language and things. So that's definitely stuck with us even back when we were a top-down game. So a lot of those things kind of stick in certain ways. You kind of are. We talked about our influences. I think we very much influenced by a lot of different things. So it kind of results in these sort of things as it takes form and takes different shapes. We kind of readapt it as we go. But gosh, I know, right? I think that's been the craziest thing is to see. Yeah, like we even had. I have all these old sketches. I didn't put them in the mirror, but even like these like weird little key art sketches I did of like gameplay of like literally like things coming and attacking your honestly the island spirit. It was this like sort of like runic stone. It's always been a stone, like a central stone thing, and so it just gets kind of iterated on and repurposed over the years. So yeah. Hmm. 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 The freedom of it, right? Yeah, there's a lot of freedom. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Uh, I mean, I mentioned a lot of ones. Yeah, I mean, to reiterate, it's like, yeah, Zelda, Shadow of the Colossus. She's, I mean, just animated films. There's just so much to draw inspiration from. I mean, we all play a lot of survival crafting game, and I've been Shrouded's been incredible. There's just so many things. Hell, I'm just out of just being a gamer, I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring again. But that doesn't necessarily have a lot of influence on this. But you never know where those things kind of like peek in. I think Souls-like games in general have this very ancient, mysterious, evocative tone to them that I'm always very intrigued by. And so I think that always, I would love to, somehow hit a tone like that kind of like in ways I think we want to explain things where we can, but I think it's really awesome to have people be like, "Ooh, what's that?" and maybe have some answers, but not have all the answers is really fun to me. So you're right. Narrative, yeah. Should we do the yeah? To me, how it's a mixture. It's really interesting. We have this like very like I showed the ancients that these big stone, stone giants. I am extremely excited to explore how they interact with the ocean. So it's like, you know, when you're sailing across the horizon, you see this, not to be super morbid, but this like remains, this corpse of this giant thing, and you sail over to it. I'm like, that's kind of this blend of the spirits and the seafaring that I get personally very excited about because I love, especially with seafaring, it is that kind of like what's on the horizon, and especially when it's not. Islands are cool and all, but it's like when you come across this thing and you see it's like its body strewn across the seas. You're like, what the heck happened here? What's the deal with this? And having us like delve into it, and hopefully you get rewarded for exploring that thing. But that's kind of the stuff that I'm very inspired by, and that's kind of this. To go back to some of the references, it's like this weird mixture of like seafaring, Shadow of the Colossus stuff that I'm I get very excited about personally. So hopefully that answers your questions. Oh, that yeah. Mhm, mhm. I want to add on to that, I guess, that question and this follow-up comment of like, where you get the help of a bunch of spirits. That actually like makes me think of like there's a whole other part of this which I mentioned, the sort of like the spirit of the ocean. Um, this cross section between how the spirits help us interact with the world. So we mentioned like the skimmer, the surfboard. That's another part of this that I think is going to be, I'm very excited about. It's this very this living embodiment of the ocean that you can, like surfing on the back of it, and it's like it gives you this whole new way of like before you have that, you're just swimming around, it's like, man, this kind of stinks. Like, is this going to get any better? And it's like, well, then we're going to hopefully give you a skimmer, then we'll give you a boat. We're going to give you all these really fun ways to interact with the ocean, and hopefully, again, hopefully they resonate and they're very evocative, and this cross section between power spirits helping me interact with the world in a really exciting way. And on top of that, it's like we also have this idea of like spirit boons, which is eventually going to come online. But it's this idea that you can quite literally like activate some sort of like blessing or bonus that might be like a group heal. These active things that will help you survive and interact with the world. So very much in yes. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like in terms of the vision, there's a lot to figure out. Obviously, I think a lot of what we've been discussing and trying to figure out is like, we've had some pretty big pivots, and this was like when we're first being like, we're gonna do more survival crafting stuff. I think the building system has been a really interesting one to kind of rethink and revisit, and so a lot of at least what I'm, as we kind of develop more, it's going to be how do we kind of start you off with something that's still satisfying but makes you feel like you're progressing. You think of thatched roofs, maybe more like sticks, something a little bit more rudimentary, and then we kind of onboard you into this more hopefully evocative stuff. It's a little bit more refined. It's got cut wood, ornate carvings, all the way up to eventually these really cool stone carved, buildings and things like that. All while trying to reinforce a lot of the spirits of the world. So it's like the idea that you could come home and you find this cute, spirit sleeping in your bed, and they're not physical, so you can kind of be like, I can still use my bed, but he's like sleeping in my bed, or he's hiding in your cupboard or something. They're kind of just finding ways to reinforce that they're like alive and around and just kind of present at your base is going to be something that I'm personally very excited to push for. So yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, those are very cool. Yeah, I mean, mhm. Yeah, special spirits and quests. Yeah, I mean, I think quests, things like that have been up in the air. We've been talking about a lot. You're gonna have these like, overarching objectives and things like that. When I think of special spirits, we're definitely planning on doing, you're gonna be able to like go around in the environment, find these like special spirits, bring them back home, awaken them, and they'll give you, unique recipes, unique things to craft and build. So, a lot of that's trying to, stab at them becoming more vital to like how you progress and like what you can build and do in the world. So hopefully, I feel like that will make them very special, but we're still feeling that out. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Yeah.